Hi, my name is Nicole Zima from Sail Away Group Travel. Next year, Crossing the Lines, M. William Phelps is hosting a 7-day river cruise down the Rhine, departing from Amsterdam. He'll bring you 2 live podcasts, book giveaways, true crime writing and podcasting workshops, narrative trips into cities along the Rhine where infamous serial killer cases occurred, and much more. For more information and to reserve your cabin, go to sailawaygrouptravel.com/truecrime before this once-in-a-lifetime experience sells out.
A 12-year-old walks out of the Montana home where he is staying, heads out to see some friends just down the street. Weeks go by and no one has seen or heard from him. Local investigators have very little to go on. Then one of his friends steps forward and, facing a few hard facts, starts talking, and a family's worst nightmare is suddenly their reality. My name is M. William Phelps. I'm an investigative journalist and the true crime author of close to 50 books. I've dedicated the past 20 years of my life to helping families of the missing and murdered. Join me. We're crossing the line. It's a windy and cold afternoon, February 23rd, 2024, in Billings, Montana, a mostly white city of about 120,000 people. American Indian and Alaska Native people make up about 4.3% of the population, many of whom are part of the Crow Indian Reservation, all 2.2 million acres of it. Not at all surprising, given our history of land theft as a nation. All of Montana in the early 1800s was tribal land. Before the railroad barons, one of whom was Frederick Billings, the founder of the city, and the government swooped in and took it. On that February 23rd day, the Billings Police Department receives a call from the Martinez family, who live in a modest one-family home in central Billings. One of 12-year-old Andy Paul Beartusk Martinez's sisters reports that she is concerned about Andy. He's not been home in 2 days. Officers ask if they can search the house. The Martinez family agrees. Police don't find anything much out of sorts. When a teenager goes missing in the United States, most adult minds generally go directly to what? Runaway. It's either instinctive or prejudicial, both of which I think share some of the same personality traits. But according to the latest data, if an investigator were to assume that a missing teen is a runaway, in 20 cases they investigate, they'd be right in only one. That is, 1 in 20 teens who go missing run away from home. Or, as other estimates claim, 7% of our youth. The National Runaway Safeline states that between 1.6 and 2.8 million of our youth, which is quite a spread there, I might say, run away from home each year. So, with all of that said, if you're a cop and you show up to a missing youth's home and begin investigating, the odds are in your favor to assume something else beyond the teen running away is going on. Now, let's take it a step further. Let's say that teen is a minority. The only data on race and runaways I could find indicates that 39% of all runaways in this country are minorities, with 57%, a little over half, white. The Martinez family gives police 2 names of Andy's friends on that February afternoon. Both of these friends are immediately found, and both report that they believe Andy took off 2 days prior, on February 21st. Andy will be 13 in a matter of weeks. And so, without any official missing person case being filed with the police department yet, one of the most common police calls for teens by family members initiates a search as Billings, Montana police begin investigating Andy Beartusk Martinez's sudden disappearance as a possible runaway. In this case, they have every reason to believe they're going down the best investigative path. considering that family members and friends are telling them that Andy, who is said to be getting himself involved with a few bad characters he's been hanging around with lately, had taken off. The description police have of Andy is a 5-foot, 3-inch kid, about 83 pounds. He has brown hair, brown eyes. In one photo of Andy later released, he is wearing a Nike hoodie, sporting a half smile. The kid could be anybody's son, brother, nephew, grandchild, friend. Born in 2011, Andy is the baby of what is a large family of 5 sisters and 7 brothers, and known to most inside that tight-knit group as a mama's boy. Kid loves his mother. He is a member of the Crow tribe, the Northern Cheyenne, and Cree. Andy has been visiting Billings from California, where he lives with his father. One of the games Andy and his siblings played as kids was to race to give their mother the first kiss goodnight before prayers and bedtime. And it was Andy who always won that race down the hall or into his mother's bedroom, kitchen, or the living room, wherever she was. He has been described by family as kind, smart, loving, protective, honest, humble, a charming soul. On March 7, 2024, now 13 days after Andy is first reported as a runaway, with no word from him and no sign of Andy anywhere, the Billings PD release a photo and description of Andy, reminding residents in the Billings area they are searching for him. Family later say that between the time Andy went missing and that news release, not much was done to find him. This is a common complaint I have heard firsthand from Indigenous families. I spent a week once in Smithers, Canada, 700 miles north of Vancouver, doing interviews for the infamous Highway of Tears serial killer case, interviewing scores of Indigenous families about their missing and presumed murdered loved ones. And I heard this same response time and again. Look, there is racial bias in this country and in Canada regarding crimes committed against Indigenous people. There can be no argument about that. I am not sure and have seen no evidence of this in Andy's case, yet it is still in the very early stages, with not everything known available at this time. I can only report what Andy's family has said publicly, and they believe they have been treated unfairly based on their race. Andy's father, who lives in California and is divorced from Andy's mother, calls Billings Police Department on March 7th, telling officers that he has been told that Andy is staying with his older sister. When they speak with her, she says she has had no contact with Andy, has not seen or heard from him since February 21st, the presumed date he left the house in Billings where his mother lives, and he hasn't been seen since. An official missing person case is then filed. From there, the Billings PD contacts several of Andy's closest friends in Billings once again. All of them say he is probably staying with a friend of his in Pryor or with his girlfriend. Pryor is 40 minutes or a 35-mile drive south of Billings. The information they have is that an older friend of Andy's drove him out there. Talking to Andy's oldest sister, the Billings PD learned several new pieces of information. When she last spoke to him, Andy expressed an interest in going to Pryor with a friend of his. It's possible, she adds, that Andy ran away. They ask about a possible motive. Why would he run away? Was he having any problems at home? Was he in trouble? Apparently, Andy was having some difficulty with his father and did not want to go back to California and continue living with him. He wanted to stay in Billings and live with his mother and siblings. Had he ever pulled anything like this before? Officers ask. He has, his sister says, according to published reports in this case. But he's never been gone this long. And there was something else, which kind of baffled most everyone involved in searching for Andy. The fact that 12-year-old Andy Beartusk Martinez has been inactive on social media since late into February. Definitely not a good sign. Almost unheard of for teens today. That is, unless you were truly interested in going off the grid and disappearing out of sight. I need to take a short break. Please stay with me. Be right back. The early days of investigating a missing person case are fueled mostly by witness statements and electronic trails. Phone records and bank accounts and computer forensics can take a bit of time to come back. And time in missing person cases becomes the enemy. Every hour that goes by is another hour further away from an answer. When these cases involve murder, minutes count. Andy Beartusk Martinez has now been missing for 2 weeks with no sign of him having had any reported contact with family or friends. The last the Billings Police Department heard was from Andy's older sister. And she said she had spoken to one of Andy's friends, and he claimed he has not seen Andy for a few weeks. And the last place he saw Andy was Central Park. That park is about 5 city blocks south from where Andy has been staying with his mother. On March 12th, Billings PD officers make contact with Andy's girlfriend. And I want to apologize for not using names here, but all of these witnesses are minors. The girlfriend offers nothing of any significance. She claims to have not seen or heard from Andy. The first break then comes when the Billings PD confirm that Andy has not accessed his social media accounts since February 21st. And the last time he did was from a house down the road from his mother's on the same street, a teenage boy Andy had been hanging around with. Police now have an address and a name. 3 more days pass. Not a word from Andy. Based on the latest computer forensic information the BPD recovered, indicating the IP address from where Andy had last accessed his social media accounts, however, it's clear Andy visited that friend who lived down the street from his mother's house on February 21st. The last time anyone saw him. That, or someone using Andy's phone, had visited that address. The BPD realized that so-called friend of Andy's had originally lied to them. So the BPD get a search warrant for his house. If Andy's phone accessed the internet from that location, either he was there or someone inside that house knows something. The kid who lives at the residence is 13 years old. So they pull him out of the house, contain him, and begin questioning him. This while other officers start searching his bedroom, where they immediately find 2 weapons, one of which has been reported stolen. That weapon has also been discharged. Not a good sign. In a shed out in the back of the house, they go in and begin looking around. There's a blanket in one corner, kind of rolled up and bulky. Another bad sign. Inside the blanket, they find the body of 12-year-old Andy Beartusk Martinez. It's clear he's been shot and deceased for some time. Inside a trash bag nearby, they discover cleaning items, saturated with what appears to be blood. The 13-year-old friend, now a suspect in Andy's death, is brought in and cautioned under Miranda. They begin questioning him. He says he has no idea where Andy is, that he hasn't seen or heard from him. The BPD, of course, know he is still lying. So they tell the boy they found Andy's body inside the shed in back of his home. Okay, he says, Andy has been staying with us at the house. He says he and Andy were playing video games in his bedroom in late February. There was another friend with them, a 19-year-old. And this older kid was fooling around with one of the guns. And all of a sudden, the gun went off. Quote, "We looked over and Andy had been shot in the head." He says it was an accident. There was no malice involved. Andy wasn't targeted. The 19-year-old was messing around with the weapon and it discharged and struck Andy in the head. After they realized Andy was dead, the 19-year-old, according to this 13-year-old, ordered me to clean up the scene and move Andy's body to the shed. He didn't report what happened to the police because he was scared. The 19-year-old is interviewed next. He says he has no idea what the other kid is talking about and that he was not involved in Andy's death in any way. They then interview another kid, a 15-year-old who shares the same bedroom with that 13-year-old. The 15-year-old has a different story. He says Andy had come over to the house on February 21st. He planned on spending the night. While Andy and the 13-year-old were playing video games, the 15-year-old asked Andy if he could see a pistol that Andy had allegedly just bought. Quote, Andy was sitting across from me. He was on his phone. I was holding the gun. I was playing with it, tapping my finger on the trigger, and it went off and it hit Andy in the head. I didn't know it was loaded. End quote. So this 15-year-old is now taking responsibility for Andy's death. What happens next? BPD investigators asked the boy. I wanted to call police right away, but the 13-year-old convinced me to cover it up by hiding Andy's body in the shed and cleaning up and throwing all of Andy's belongings in the trash bin. So we have 4 boys now, 12, 13, 15, and 19, all of whom are in this bedroom, one of whom is horsing around with a loaded pistol. It goes off. That round winds up in Andy's head and he dies. But where is the truth within these different versions of the story? Is Andy's death accidental or murder? They could all be lying. Though the BPD have recovered Andy's body and have several suspects implicated in his death, the investigation is far from over. They need to figure out who is responsible for 12-year-old Andy's death, which in this type of situation can be a difficult task if these boys keep changing their stories. So what do? Turn to the evidence. While those interviews are going on, CSIs are inside the bedroom where Andy was shot conducting a thorough examination, going through everything, inch by inch. The forensic evidence should either support or dispute the stories they are being told. On one of the walls near the bed where Andy was said to be sitting, they find blood and, as they later describe, a defect on the wall. And this defect on the wall had been hidden behind a sticker that was recently placed on the wall. One other bit of information the 15-year-old gives them is that the 19-year-old there at the time had nothing to do with any of it. The BPD continue to investigate Andy's death. As they do, something happens. Word begins to spread, of course, that 3 kids are in custody, and anyone close to Andy or in the neighborhood know who they are based on the large presence of law enforcement and forensic vehicles parked outside the home on the day the boys are arrested. On March 20, the house where Andy's body was found out back in the shed is vandalized. The front door windows are smashed in and the sidewalk is spray painted. Police immediately come out and say they believe those crimes are an act of retribution over Andy's death. So there's some tension here in this neighborhood and the talk that's going on, and police fear it will only escalate. Andy's family gathers and speaks out. In an interview with KTVQ, Andy's aunt says this: Andy was a very caring young man, child, and I'm upset with just the complete disregard of my nephew when the family was calling saying he is not a runaway. So here we have this controversy now coming into play that I was talking about earlier. The family goes on to say they tried reporting Andy missing several times, but nobody in law enforcement listened until March 7th. What's clear is that no official missing person report was filed until March 7th. Even though the BPD was out chasing down leads, interviewing people, and searching for Andy from that February 23rd date when, according to the BPD, one of Andy's sisters called to report that he had not come home and she feared he had run away. The BPD also works under a policy that any child 12 and under cannot be considered a runaway and is investigated as a missing person. Controversy here then erupts over what is called a MEPA alert, which stands for Missing Endangered Person Advisory. An Amber Alert, basically. Andy's case fit into the parameters of the MEPA, no question about it. The BPD says it tried to get both Amber and MEPA released, but they were denied by the State Department of Justice. Why the local DOJ, or any DOJ for that matter, would deny such a thing is a question we need to be asking. A 12-year-old, not heard from, not on social media, seemingly vanishing, and political bullshit gets in the way of putting out an alert to find him is unacceptable, in my opinion. Something is wrong there, and it needs to be fixed. There is also an issue, according to the BPD, of the family reportedly not cooperating at the earliest stages of the investigation into Andy's whereabouts. BPD Lieutenant Matt Lennox tells KTVQ, quote, "We are dealing with this element of individuals who provide a lot of false information on the front end. So the police, are following up on all these leads here because they're being told erroneous information." It's basically what he's saying. And it takes time to develop those leads, whether they're true or they're not true. Another major factor for the BPD was that Andy's mother, at the time he went missing, was incarcerated in a Wyoming prison, and other family members had refused to help. From the first call about Andy, the lieutenant added, family said they were concerned he had run away. So they approached the case as a runaway child from that first moment forward, despite their own policy. The family then goes toe-to-toe with the BPD after Andy's body is found and those boys are arrested. His aunt reads a prepared statement at a memorial for Andy outside the house where he was found, attacking the BPD and the power structure of law enforcement as a whole, in part saying, why did this happen? How did the very foundation of his life, his family, his tribal community, and the agencies within this community let him down? End quote. I think that comment right there puts it all into a fair perspective. That Andy's death is partially on us, all of us. The challenging part for family and friends at this stage of the investigation, right after those 3 teens are arrested in connection to Andy's death, becomes what it really looks like to them. That Andy Martinez was allegedly murdered. When I come back from a final break, we'll go through those charges and where everything currently stands. And if you haven't subscribed, please do. I don't envy Billings police and their position within the investigation into Andy's death. There are going to be no winners in this. The BPD are working under a history of indigenous mistreatment and racism perpetrated by law enforcement from all over this country and Canada. No matter what they did or didn't do, the BPD go into this case with all of that ugly history of racial bias hanging on their backs, whether they themselves are guilty of it or not. The indigenous likewise have suffered and been profiled and attacked and mistreated by law enforcement all over North America for centuries. Andy's family want and deserve justice. What that justice is and who will eventually pay the price needs sorting out. In early April 2024, the 13 and 15-year-old are charged, the latter with firing a weapon in a reckless and negligent manner, causing Andy's death, which is negligent homicide. That's a serious felony. The former, the 13-year-old, is charged with 2 counts of tampering with and/or fabricating evidence, hiding Andy's body, cleaning up the crime scene, and destroying evidence. Again, all very serious felonies. There is also an obstruction charge pending in the 13-year-old's case, along with misdirecting an investigation by providing false information. Prosecutors released a statement on April 5th, 2024, saying the end result at this stage is that Andy Paul Beartusk Martinez sadly, tragically died from an accidental gunshot. Of course, Andy's family is in a state of confusion, terrible pain, and emotional vulnerability. Like I said, they want justice. Andy deserves it. And there is an indication that they believe somebody is responsible for Andy's death beyond negligence. Then family claims that if the BPD had taken the case seriously and acted quickly in late February, that the outcome might have been different. I'm not sure we will ever know that. This case is not fully resolved, and I am under the impression that the investigation is still ongoing. Andy's sister, who had initially reported him missing in late February, spoke to the media and said that she feels she was not believed by law enforcement when she initially reported Andy missing, that her pleas were not taken seriously. This harkens back to the racial bias I spoke of earlier, that there's a different course of justice for minorities in the United States. I have no evidence one way or another in this case. I do think that in each one of these cases we cover, we do get one step closer to exposing the issues we face in the world of crime, where it pertains to the mistreatment of minorities and the marginalized. We have to face it. We have to fix it. The iconic statue, Lady Justice, holds scales in her hands, and she is blindfolded for a reason. We need to go into any case, no matter who it is or where it is, the social standing of the victim, status, the color of their skin, as if that victim is everybody. Everyone deserves equal justice is almost a cliche now. That justice, however, begins at the very moment the investigation opens. It sounds so simple, and it sounds so strange to even have to say it. Yet in case after case, here in the year 2024, we sometimes see the same sets of circumstances we've seen for 100 years. I'd just like to thank Emma, a listener, who wrote in and asked me to cover this case. Here she is leaving me a voicemail, which I think explains the importance of covering these stories.
Hi, Phelps. This is Emma. I was thinking if you did an episode like this, maybe more attention from the general public would be drawn towards missing and murdered Indigenous people, and it may spark more concern for them, because I haven't really seen a whole lot about any of these kind of cases, and if I do, it's like a small segment on the news, not even like a full news story. I think that's a little bit messed up, so.
Says it all. I generally don't cover cases in such an early stage of the investigation. I like to let all the facts come out, see the documentation, but I thought a conversation about this one deserved to be started. The importance of Indigenous stories within the true crime space is something I need to pay more attention to. We all do. Be back next week with a new case, and please tell someone about us and, of course, subscribe. You can find me at M. Phelps on the TikToks, the Facebooks, the Twitters, the X's, whatever. As always, be safe, be aware. Sources for this episode include: family of killed 12-year-old said they have reason to believe it was no accident. KTVQ by Marcus Kakova, April 6, 2024. Prosecutors: missing 12-year-old Billings boy killed by accidental gunshot. KTVQ by Greg Tuttle, April 5th, 2024. New details in 12-year-old's homicide investigation released by Billings Police. Diane Casanova, nonstop local Billings news director, April 5th, 2024. Billings Police Department press release, March 15, 2024, and search warrant. And Andy Paul Beartusk Martinez's obituary. CTL is produced by M. William Phelps, LLC. Written, and executive produced by me, M. William Phelps. Audio mastering and mixing by Matt Russell.